Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Canada Truth Channel, where Canada, the illusion of freedom and system of control is exposed. Today's video, bankers. So, we have a new liberal leader and a new de facto prime minister who is a very proud central banker. I'm going to show you how dangerous these central bankers are to the people of the world. Canadian Taxpayers Federation. So, Canada's federal debt. As you can see, um, $1.25 trillion in debt. Our share, your share, my share, your infant's share, your 3-year-old boy or girl's share, your 12-year-old in school, their share, $29,907.01. So, as I've shown you in previous videos, um, we are used as collateral. Our tax dollars are used as collateral to borrow against this debt. Most of the growth of debt per day is interest that we're paying to private foreign banks for absolutely no reason other than to join the Enslave the World Club, which is exactly what happened to Canada in 1974. So let's dig a little deeper. Um, this graph is from the Fraser Institute. This is an old study from 2016, a really quick history of Canada's federal debt. Now, you can see it's pretty obvious that throughout Canada's history, the debt has been pretty manageable until 1975. And then our debt just about hits vertical. What happened? Let's find out. But keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, the Bank of Canada was created in 1935. So from 1935 until 1975, basically, all those years, we created the Trans-Canada Highway. Most of our major hospitals and universities and schools and city infrastructures all created during this time period from 1935 to about 1975, including a lot of our social programs. And as you can see, the debt was pretty much managed. We can see a blip here in 1947, which is understandable because we had World War II debt to pay for. And if you look at the good old debt clock, if we type in 1947, find the debt. So we can see what the debt was. And this is this is for all the debt that Canada accrued during World War II. Everything that we had to pay for during World War II. And Canadian share was $919. So, although it's a different video altogether, $919, um, we had to pay off our war debt, right? So every country that participated and was affected by World War II had debt. Guess who that debt went to? Well, it went to international private banks. One of them being the Bank of International Settlements. Now, so here we have 1947. Now let's jump ahead to 1973. And keep in mind, all of that infrastructure and social programs, all created within that time period, personal debt went down. Okay? So now we jump back to today and $29,000 each. Almost $30,000 for every man, woman, and child in Canada for no reason. Completely unnecessary. Let me show you why. Comer, Committee on Monetary and Economic Reform. So here is a press bulletin from 2011. Two Canadians and a Canadian economic think tank confront the global financial powers in the Canadian Federal Court. The Canadians plead for declarations that would restore the use of the Bank of Canada for the benefit of Canadians and remove it from the control of international private entities whose interests and directives are placed above the interest of Canadians and the primacy of the Constitution of Canada. Um, The plaintiffs state that since 1974, there has been a gradual but sure slide into the reality that the Bank of Canada and Canada's monetary and financial policy are dictated by private foreign banks and financial interests contrary to the Bank of Canada Act. The plaintiffs state that the Bank of International Settlements, BIS, and Financial Stability Forum, and the International Monetary Fund were all created with the cognizant intent of keeping poorer nations in their place, which has now expanded to all nations, in that these financial institutions largely succeed in overriding governments and constitutional orders in countries such as Canada over which they exert financial control. The plaintiffs state that the meetings of the BIS and FSB, their minutes, their discussions, and deliberations are secret and not available nor accountable to Parliament, the executive, nor Canadian public, notwithstanding that the Bank of Canada policies directly emanate from these meetings. These organizations are essentially private foreign entities controlling Canada's banking system and socio-economic policies. So this this case went on for 5.5 years. And let's have a look at the Bank of Canada Act to see what Comer and Rocco Galati and the Comer versus the Bank of Canada case is all about. So, the preamble. Whereas it is desirable to establish a central bank in Canada to regulate credit and currency in the best interests of the economic life of the nation, to control and protect the external value of the national monetary unit, and to mitigate by its influence fluctuations in general level of production, trade, prices, and employment, so far as may be possible within the scope of monetary action, and generally to promote the economic and financial welfare of Canada. So the preamble tells you what the purpose of the act is for. So, in the best interests of Canada and Canadians, it was created. And its intent is to act on the best interests of Canada and Canadians. Make sense? Pretty straightforward. Now, specifically, there was a couple of sections that the Comer case challenged, one of them being powers and business of the bank. And specifically, make loans or advance for periods not exceeding 6 months to the Government of Canada or the government of any province, taking security in readily marketable securities issued or guaranteed by Canada or any province, make loans to the Government of Canada or government of any province, but such loans outstanding any one time shall not, in the case of the Government of Canada, exceed 1/3 of the estimated revenue of the Government of Canada for its fiscal year, and not, in the case of provincial government, exceed 1/4 of the government's estimated revenue for the fiscal year. So, one of the powers of the bank is to loan money um, at zero or almost zero, very, very low interest rates to the Government of Canada and the government of the provinces for infrastructure and all of that type of thing, which, looking back at our graph from 35 all the way to 75, that's pretty much what happened, and the debt was very manageable until dun, da, 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 the Bank of International Settlements. So this Basel Committee went around to all of the nations that weren't enslaved to international foreign banks, central banks, and com- convinced them that this was the only thing to do. This was the new way of the world, and all of their problems would be solved by just um, abandoning the loans from the Bank of Canada at zero or little interest, and now taking loans from these bankers at, of course, compounded interest. And we can see the direct result of what happened there. So, slowly but surely, these banks have been taking over every country in the world, and they pretty much dictate to all of those countries' central banks monetary policy that suits them, that makes them profit, that steals from us. And if we take a look at the history of the Bank of Canada, so there was a commission, and in 1935, an appendix to the report titled Suggestions as to Some of the Main Features of the Constitution of a Central Bank for Canada became the framework for the Bank of Canada Act. The act received royal assent in 34. In 35, the Bank of Canada opened its doors as a privately owned institution that sold shares to the public. After that, in 1938, the new government introduced amendments to the Bank of Canada to nationalize the Bank of Canada, making it a publicly owned central bank, which it still is today. However, it is captured by the Bank of International Settlements and the IMF and all of the other big central bankers. So, a little bit more about Comer and the lawsuit. Um, a basic summary from Comer from their website. After nearly 5.5 years of contentious litigation between the Committee on Monetary and Economic Reform and the Government of Canada, involving 3 separate federal court and 2 additional federal Court of Appeal hearings, resulting in contrary decisions, on May 4th, 2017, the Supreme Court of Canada dismissed Comer's leave permission to appeal application from the second judgment of the Federal Court of Appeal. So basically, here's another statement after the decision. Basically, the Supreme Court said, no, we're not going to hear this. This is a government issue. This isn't a legal issue. Following established practice, the federal Supreme Court does not issue reasons when it dismisses a leave application. The dismissal by the Supreme Court of the leave application means only that the court does not want to hear the appeal. The jurisprudence on this is clear. It does not mean that the lower court decisions are correct in law. The possible reasons for the Supreme Court not wanting to hear the case are many and various, including the washing of their hands or deference to the political process. Hence, this is why reasons are not issued by the Supreme Court in leave dismissals. And if we look at the application for leave from the Supreme Court of Canada, we can see that between Comer and Her Majesty the Queen, Minister of Finance, Minister of National Revenue, Bank of Canada, and the Attorney General, and the court basically says the request for an oral hearing is dismissed. The application for leave to appeal from the judgment of the Federal Court of Appeal is dismissed with cost. So we're not going to hear it. We don't have to tell you why. That's it. So our new installed Liberal leader and de facto Prime Minister is part of the central banking system, and we can see the direct results of private central bankers like our new installed Prime Minister, what they actually do to Canada. So have a look at your share, your children's share, and who knows what your grandchildren's share is going to be for absolutely no reason. These people are enslaving the entire planet. A simple graph, you cannot make it any more plain than that. And of course, this graph is 10 years old already. So it tops out at 700,000, and we know we're $1.25 trillion. We're on our way to 2 trillion in debt. And most of that is interest because Pierre Elliott Trudeau and the Basel Committee decided what was best for Canadians to enslave them to the Bank of International Settlements. Were you consulted on this huge new monetary policy? No, I didn't think you were. Pierre Trudeau sent out a directive to all of his government. We are not borrowing from the Bank of Canada anymore. We are now borrowing at compounded interest from the Bank of International Settlements. And just like every other study that someone wants to benefit them, they just pay off the people conducting the study. They'll poll a certain population. They will conduct studies to benefit their narrative. And the people conducting those studies are all usually funded by the government. So all the economists out there and experts saying, no, we have to keep borrowing from the Bank of International Settlements at compounded interest or inflation will go through the roof. Well, think about it rationally. That's insane. They're being paid to tell you this nonsense by who? The people that benefit, right? And not even the Supreme Court of Canada dare go against these people. It's going to take the people like you and I. A perfect example of this, which no one talks about, is Iceland. After the collapse in 2008, Iceland jailed and threw out all the bankers. They wrote their own constitution, and they did it all by the people for the people. And you rarely hear about that. Maybe I'll do, as an example for Canada to follow, maybe I'll do a detailed video on how Iceland did it. Their government, unfortunately, went against the will of the people. Um, and I believe that's still an ongoing issue. However, as you can see, um, central bankers are very, very dangerous. And now we have one that's been installed as prime minister. So um, beware. Um, Already there's been another gun grab. Expect more. Expect them to come after every firearm in Canada because free speech and the ability to protect yourself, that's the two things they go for first. So stay tuned for the next video and thanks for watching.